What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about episode 3, season 2 of 1923, and I'll just kind of go through some scenes by scenes, and we'll talk about some of my thoughts and opinions. Some of the major themes I noticed in this episode were survival and desperation, loyalty and pragmatism, endurance and strength of all of our characters and their subplots. We only see U.S. Marshal Fossett on screen for a short amount of time in this episode, and you wonder if she's going to take justice into her own hands or follow the law, because she notices that there were some Comanche deaths from the fire the night before involving U.S. Marshal Kent and Father Renaud. And you wonder, how does this tie into the larger power struggles in 1923, especially here in season 2? And my prediction is that both U.S. Marshal Kent and Father Renaud are both going to die on this journey. They won't make it past season 2 here, and that it might be at the hands of U.S. Marshal Fossett. One of the most interesting moments of the show is the question of survival in the brutal conditions, most of all this winter. Jacob Dutton and company decide to burn the wagon for warmth because you can replace supplies, but if you freeze to death, none of that matters. So the only option and logical decision is to burn the wagon. Zane even says that I'll survive on horseback, but let's get some warmth going first. Jacob Dutton finally returns home, and I'm glad it didn't take too long. They didn't drag it out, which is nice. And he understands that the winter has been harsh up here since he's been gone. The cold isn't just a backdrop in this episode, because it's an ever-present reminder, as we've seen in the previous 2 episodes, that nature doesn't really care about your personal struggles. It forces people to make hard choices, and that's what the theme we see in this episode, and we've kind of seen as a precursor in the previous 2 episodes. One of the things that's very apparent in this episode is that Cara Dutton isn't playing around, and you wonder, is Elizabeth cut out for this lifestyle? Yet again, Elizabeth refuses to take the shot for her rabies after the wolf attack, and Cara does what she has to do, and she has to slap some sense into her and forces her to take it. Now, this raises an interesting question. Was Cara right to take control herself, or should Elizabeth have been allowed to make her own decision here? And Elizabeth complains a lot, especially once Jake comes back. Then there's this bigger question. Does Elizabeth know what the term for better or for worse means? Because this moment really tests her. If she's going to be a part of this family, she has to be strong enough to handle the harsh reality of life here. And Jack watches as all of this unfolds, because he's now being privy and understanding what's taken place here while he's been gone. And you wonder, how does this make him feel? Because we can look at his facial expression and just see he's kind of shocked by it all. And I really do think that Elizabeth is slowly breaking under pressure episode by episode. Talking more about Jacob returning home as he walks into another crisis after living through a blizzard here, it's about Zane's serious injury. So Dr. Miller tells Jacob and diagnoses Zane that he has acute hematoma, which is not good. It's a brain injury that even today is considered very serious. And to think that someone might have acute hematoma now, and thankfully we do have the medical procedures to handle something like that, even though it is still serious, because you have no modern medicine, you have no advanced surgical techniques, and it's just, even a head injury like that is just considered a death sentence in the 1920s. Now moving on to Spencer here, as he travels with Luca to carry out Salvatore Maceo's deal that he made with him. And this is the part that really highlights the theme of loyalty versus pragmatism here between Spencer and Luca. What they're about to get into is a roadblock, and they stop beforehand to take a little peek and decide that, hey, we need to turn around, and because essentially it's either like a bribe or fighting stance that they're not going to win either way, so we have to find a better route to take. And Luca insists on pushing through. He says that, that's what my cousin gave us a gun for, that's what my cousin gave us a cash for, but he doesn't understand the obvious danger that Spencer realizes. But Luca is blinded by family loyalty. Spencer asks a great question. Why risk your life for a family member who's already betrayed you here? And Luca's answer is quite simple. Because they're my family. The question I have is blind loyalty a virtue, or is it just a slow death sentence? Because Luca has the gun at one point and points it at Spencer, just kind of knocks it out of his hands like, what are you doing here? Try to think about where I'm coming from. But Spencer allows Luca to make his own choice. Spencer chooses to survive as opposed to trying to be sentimental here, because he understands what he's trying to do for his own family, but it's not this suicide approach. While Luca decides to take the truck, take the gun, and go down with the ship. And as Spencer continues walking, he starts to hear the gunshots and runs up the hill and sees the blockade with the men at the blockade shooting and running after Luca and eventually gun him down. And it bums Spencer out, and I think he ultimately tried to genuinely look out for him, like being the little guy, but at the same time, he could only do so much, and he wasn't about to forcefully keep him there, because that's not not what Spencer is about. Much like Spencer's journey here, even through this third episode, we see Alex being a highlight of this entire episode, and we see a lot of what she's had to struggle with. The entire immigration process was kind of hard to watch in some cases, and the whole medical exam process to me just felt really excessive. Her having to go through 3 different examiners, it just sounded more like a power trip than anything. And at first she tries to play it smart, saying, "Who are you married to?" "Well, I'm married to someone named Dutton. That's my last name, Alexandra Dutton." And I think it does help her case in the long run. Even when she's confronted with a man trying to degrade her, she throws it right back in his face. And as she's told to read a book, she chooses a passage from Walt Whitman that feels symbolic. She's in a place where she's feeling judged, degraded, and treated as a lesser individual, and she refuses to let them define her for who she is. It was actually a pretty good scene because she stuns him in that moment and is on her way, and she proves that she's smart, well-read, and an intellectual. She also gets a lot of practical survival advice from strangers, no less, because who else is going to give her that sort of advice? Hide your ticket, hide your cash. Once you take out your cash from one spot, you better hide it in the different spot because pickpocketers have already seen the first place you hid it. And just don't trust anyone too nice, which is kind of crazy because obviously she's a woman. She's primed for picking off because she's also alone in her travels. And there's this parallel of her journey as this world that she's stepping to is just as brutal as Spencer's, but just in different ways. And I think because of all that she's having to endure, it really does show how much she truly loves Spencer and how much she's willing to go through just to get back to him. And this episode has a bit of a cliffhanger here, and it's this new challenge as the episode closes, as she's writing a love letter to Spencer with her narration. It's just another reminder of how much they're fighting and trying to be together. Right as you think she's about to catch a break, she goes into the ladies' room, and you can see a sketchy, shady fellow who follows her right in, and then it cuts. And it's showing her that her struggles are not over yet, and going into episode 4, she's going to have to fight this man off. Will someone be there to protect her, to help her out? Is she the only woman in that restroom, or will someone else be there so it makes it a little awkward? But I'm sure the pickpocketer won't really care and try to do whatever he can to get the money from Alex. Overall, I'd say this episode was better than episode 2, and I think was pretty much on par with episode 1 in terms of, more survival on the frontier, the Cara versus Elizabeth routine where Elizabeth is breaking and Cara is trying to be the strong woman in the house, showcasing Alex's journey and being parallel to what Spencer is also having to endure. And this episode also asks whether or not Elizabeth will toughen up or will she leave. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you in the next episode of 1923. Cheers.